In the quiet of night, an armed squad infiltrated a company researching air compression and sales. Their target this time was the atmospheric acceleration mechanic. A curious female squad member kept questioning her teammates. "It's just a few oxygen tanks, do they really need to break in like this?" Just as they entered, they discovered an unconscious security guard in the hallway. The girl quickly ran over to check on him. Suddenly, a loud explosion made the whole team jump back. After the smoke cleared, they dared to investigate further. The hallway bars had been cleanly cut by a beam of light. Upon closer inspection, the girl discovered it was freezing. How could robbers cut through steel like that? The squad leader called to her. "There's a subway line beneath this building." The thieves cut through the floor and escaped. The next morning, news of the research facility robbery spread throughout the city. A young man sitting on a rooftop frowned in annoyance, then activated a device on his neck and fell downward. Not suicide, just the quickest way down. He landed extremely coolly, then walked into the hospital as if nothing had happened. A little girl tugged at his shirt, scolding him. Today was his discharge day, when his bandages would be removed, but he was late for the appointment. Misaka was very upset with him. The young man ignored her and walked away, forcing Misaka to follow him, insisting he get his bandages removed. After a while, the doctor finally finished removing his bandages. The doctor wanted to do some additional checks, but the young man didn't think it necessary and was about to leave when the doctor stopped him. This time, the bullet had fortunately missed the vital part of his head. But to be safe, he should still undergo testing, because any deterioration could be life-threatening. The doctor was so persistent that the young man had to sit back and give his information. He was once the number 1 among 7 aspirers at the academy. His ability was controlling various forces and temperatures. In the past, he had participated in the Level 6 Evolution project, and then tragedy struck. He was shot and had to rely on the device on his neck to walk and talk normally. Seeing Accelerator conversing smoothly, the doctor didn't ask anything further. Outside, Misaka was sitting and waiting when several Misaka clones appeared. She had called them to plan a celebration for Accelerator's discharge. Meanwhile, at the hospital's main lobby, a policewoman and her team approached the reception desk, demanding to see the hospital director. The presence of fully armed city protectors made everyone immediately clear the area, knowing they weren't there for a checkup. A young woman approached to greet the policewoman and was told about the morning robbery at the research facility. On the surface, it was just an air research facility, but it actually produced secret weapons, which was what the thieves had taken. When questioned, the facility refused to provide information, so the anti-skill team immediately confirmed that this facility had government connections. What the thieves took was a cutting machine capable of cutting through anything. After further investigation, she also determined that the thieves were carrying this weapon to fight against Accelerator, who was in this hospital. She predicted the thieves would come here, so she brought people to protect the hospital. But this number was too small to catch a gang carrying such a destructive weapon. The policewoman knew that after the information about the stolen weapon spread, the VIPs had feared the thieves would come after them, so they had diverted most police in the station to protect themselves. Only this many teammates could go on mission with her. As predicted, the thieves did come. Yomikawa deployed her team to block the thieves. Despite having riot shields, with just one slash, the cutting machine cut through the shields and severed a policeman's arm. Seeing the situation deteriorate, Yomikawa ordered everyone to fire, but somehow the bullets froze in front of the thieves and fell to the ground. The two sides fought fiercely while Accelerator calmly lay reading a book. It was then that the purple-haired girl entered his room, suggesting Accelerator should escape first. If the thieves couldn't find him, they would surely destroy the hospital anyway. The thieves' weapons were too terrifying, destroying everything in their path and forcing the police team to retreat and defend. At this moment, a teammate discovered that the man beside them seemed to be supplying something to the cutting machine. The cutting machine needed materials to operate, so he came up with an idea. Take down the guy with the backpack first, and she would have no more toys. They quickly confirmed the identities of the group. The one holding the weapon was Yoko, the girl on the left was Minori, and the guy with supplies was Hiromi. They were all high school students. According to the law, Yomikawa couldn't point guns at children. So she pulled out her baton and charged at Yoko, then tried to grab Hiromi, but somehow her vision blurred. As Yomikawa collapsed, Yoko was about to finish her off when Hiromi kicked Yomikawa away and reminded Yoko they weren't here to kill people. In the kitchen, Misaka had retrieved all her cakes. These cakes were to celebrate Accelerator's discharge day, so they couldn't be damaged. Unable to advance or retreat, as right behind the police group was the hospital's nursery. Yomikawa came up with another tactical plan. She had Ito and Takahashi join forces with her to defeat these 3 arrogant kids. The plan was simple. All 3 would charge forward, and whoever wasn't slashed would take down Yoko. Just as the 3 charged, the wall next to Yoko cracked. Hiromi noticed and pushed Yoko back, taking the full blast of an explosion. Accelerator stepped out, annoyed, cursing at Yoko. The noise next to his hospital room made it impossible to sleep. Seeing Accelerator appear, Yoko was delighted. She slashed twice but couldn't hit Accelerator at all due to his ability. This wouldn't be easy to take him down. Accelerator thought differently though. With or without payment, he could still win against Yoko. Just then, Misaka ran to Accelerator's side. She knew full well he would go looking for a fight rather than seeking shelter. Misaka ran to Accelerator carrying a bag of cakes, just as the ceiling collapsed. Accelerator had to bend over to shield the little girl, allowing Yoko to snatch Misaka's bag of cakes. Watching this, Minori felt something was wrong. She turned to remind Yoko they didn't need to make such a big deal. Seeing Minori's point, Yoko stopped, released 2 smoke bombs, and fled immediately. Accelerator was now furious. There was no way they could just come and go so easily. Seeing Accelerator's intention to pursue the thieves, a female patient offered to give him a ride in her car. To avoid satellite detection, Accelerator knew they would hide in the tunnel, so he just needed to go down there to catch them. Earlier, Hiromi had taken a full hit from Accelerator, but Yoko and Minori didn't rescue him and just left, making Minori feel guilty and afraid Hiromi would be captured. Yoko didn't care at all. The stored information Minori was holding was what mattered. If they could deliver it to the laboratory and sell it, they would become billionaires. At that point, rescuing Hiromi wouldn't be an issue anymore. For now, they had to escape capture, and to do that, Yoko had left some bombs on the support columns. Just then, Accelerator caught up to them. Startled, Yoko immediately detonated all of them. But somehow Accelerator remained unharmed. He lunged forward, grabbed Yoko by the neck, and told her he understood perfectly well the weapon she was using. What was being released was nitrogen, which freezes at -210 degrees. This element absorbs surrounding oxygen, which is why people approaching Yoko would feel dizzy due to lack of oxygen. Accelerator flung Yoko against the wall. Of course, even nitrogen users would be similarly affected, but Yoko could still breathe normally. This made Accelerator immediately guess that the issue lay with Minori, who had the ability to control air, helping her teammates breathe. How naive to think these petty abilities could defeat me. Accelerator unleashed his power, making Yoko sweat profusely. Yet she still wanted to fight, putting all her strength into one slash, but Accelerator merely waved his hand and deflected it back at her. Then he rushed forward and gave her another kick, knocking her out instantly. At this point, Minori jumped out to stop Accelerator, threatening to kill him if he harmed Yoko further. Her mouth made threats, but her legs were trembling. Accelerator sighed and decided to spare these two. He took the bag of cakes back to give to Misaka, curious about what was inside. Misaka happily gave it back to Accelerator. This is a gift to celebrate Accelerator's discharge from the hospital, so he had to accept it. As twilight fell, a girl sat on a bridge and threw herself into the river. When she regained consciousness, she had been taken to a hospital for emergency treatment. This made her very frustrated. She had even left a suicide note, but couldn't even die properly. 3 doctors stood beside her, taking very careful care of her. Her breathing and all functions had stabilized, but somehow they suddenly declared she was guilty. Just now she had attempted suicide but failed, and now they wanted her to die, to avoid police detection. These 3 were careful to use river water from where she had attempted suicide. This was more painful than suicide itself. The girl struggled but couldn't escape. After death, her body would be used by an organization called DA. 3 days later, the city police had another mission. They had to operate to catch a criminal with the ability to control corpses, hiding in the hospital. Although one team member was injured, the plan still had to proceed. The priority was still to protect the patients, so this police group acted very quietly. The team gradually moved up to the 2nd floor, when at this moment, the criminal appeared behind them, ambushing them. Accelerator was still lying in his room, leisurely reading a book. It seemed he had already detected something but didn't care at all. Seeing the police group draw their guns, knowing she couldn't fight against this force, the female criminal immediately fled, following a guide sheet directly into Accelerator's room. Seeing him lying on the bed, not matching the description at all, made her hesitate. However, there was no more time. She took out a photo of Misaka and wanted to ask about her whereabouts. Just as she finished speaking, the police group burst in. The criminal desperately tried to escape through the window, but it was too late. She was hit by the police's electric shock bullet and collapsed. Yet she still struggled to reach for Misaka's photo, gasping to remind Accelerator that if he didn't find her quickly, the little girl would be in danger. Not allowing her to say more, the police subdued her and took her away. Accelerator pretended not to hear anything to avoid further trouble. After the police group left, he sat up and stared intently at Misaka's photo on the floor. Below the hospital, the police group escorted the criminal to their vehicle, then reported back to headquarters. The arrest went quite smoothly, so they didn't need to use the coffin plan. Otherwise, they might have been in mortal danger too. Inside the car, the criminal girl had regained consciousness. To discipline a bad child, some punishment was needed. So one police officer smiled and strangled her while the other started the car, preparing to leave. Just as the headlights came on, Accelerator appeared right in front of the car. The criminal girl they had just arrested had some things he needed to ask her. One police officer immediately pointed his gun at Accelerator and refused, making Accelerator realize immediately these weren't anti-skill police. The police he knew followed rules and would never point guns at a civilian like him. Having been seen through, the man didn't bother pretending anymore and cursed at Accelerator. To him, anti-skill police were just imposters. The day organization he served was the true justice. He gave Accelerator one last chance. Move aside or he would tear him apart right now. Accelerator pretended to be scared, then taunted him back. Seeing the unexpected situation, his teammate looked out and advised that according to orders, they shouldn't harm patients. But by now, the other one was too angry to care. There are no patients here, just someone blocking the way, and those who block the way must receive appropriate punishment. With that, he immediately fired at Accelerator. The bullet flew toward Accelerator's forehead but was deflected by his ability. Seeing the situation worsen, the driver accelerated, wanting to run Accelerator over, but somehow he was able to lift their entire armored vehicle and throw it behind him. With Accelerator's terrifying power, the DA had to deploy their final plan. They activated a device called a coffin, and from inside the armored car emerged a giant robot. It fired its cannons directly at Accelerator, who remained unharmed after this attack. Meanwhile, the female criminal had managed to untie herself and escape outside thanks to Accelerator's spectacular car flip. Accelerator laughed out loud at what Da called justice. The pressure of the strong emanated from him, making the Da member sweat in fear. He maximized the coffin's output and fired at Accelerator, still unable to touch even a hair on him. Accelerator laughed, mocking. So that's all the power of that toy? Then it's time for me to smash this thing. Accelerator charged at the robot, which kept firing. With his ability, Accelerator could deflect its attacks, then find a weakness and destroy the robot in one blow. With their life-saving equipment destroyed and no more toys left, the DA member could only run away. Accelerator was about to chase after him when a girl's corpse suddenly fell from inside the robot, startling him. Just then, the anti-skill police group arrived at the scene. They immediately surrounded Accelerator, asking him to cooperate. Yomikawa appeared to bail Accelerator out, quite sure from what had just happened that Accelerator was only a victim. Afterward, Accelerator told her everything. "Da organization? I've never heard of this name before," she said. As for the girl, she had been wrapped in a body bag by the police group. Her body was kept very clean, but signs of life had long gone. Very quickly, the police also confirmed the identity of the corpse. It was Hasami, a girl who had jumped off a bridge to commit suicide 3 days ago. It seemed like the self-proclaimed Da group had used Hasami's ability for this giant robot. That was just Accelerator's guess, but the police officers found it illogical. In the files, Hasami's ability was only level 2, but this scene looked like it must have been caused by at least a level 4. That's not my business. If you want to know, go investigate further. Accelerator stood up and returned to the hospital. Meanwhile, the DA member who had luckily survived returned to report the entire mission to his superiors. He was very angry and blamed the doctor. Clearly, the robot was confirmed to be level 4, so how could it not fight against a patient in the hospital? That was just a prototype, so it couldn't exert its full power yet, the doctor replied. Initially, they had insisted on bringing that item along. Now it was destroyed, and they turned around and blamed them. More importantly was the target of this mission. The target had to be brought to the project site for them to continue. Mentioning this made the other man turn pale, as during the battle, the target had escaped. Da was a justice organization, and if justice couldn't fight against evil, then what was the point of keeping it? The leadership didn't want to feed a dog that couldn't guard the house, so the next step they handed over all authority to Da Chun to handle. The failed Da member was now useless, so he also decided to reclaim his body. All that was left were his hopeless screams. Back at the hospital, Accelerator encountered Misaka on his way back to his room. It was midnight, but he was still out, making Misaka very curious. Children shouldn't stay up late, so Accelerator sent Misaka back to her room. Then he suddenly remembered what the girl had said earlier, that if he didn't pay attention to Misaka, she would be in danger. So Accelerator turned back to pat Misaka's head, promising he wouldn't go anywhere to reassure her, then returned to his own room. By now, the criminal girl was already waiting for him there. She introduced herself as Esther, acknowledging it was a bit presumptuous after just being saved by Accelerator once, but there was something she needed his help with. Immediately, Accelerator used his ability to strangle Esther. "You have some misunderstanding here. I'm not a good person who saved you. To prove this, Accelerator threatened to kill Esther right there." Esther burst into tears, not resisting and accepting her fate. She returned to ask for Accelerator's help because it was necessary, because otherwise, this world would come to an end. "This is my sin because I was the one who taught the Day organization how to control corpses. If my death can make Accelerator act to stop them, then I accept Accelerator dealing with me right here. Hearing this, Accelerator withdrew his ability and released Esther. Then he asked about the whereabouts of the Da. Not a bad guy, Accelerator smiled. Then I'll eliminate this Da group so Esther can know what a real bad guy is like. Accelerator and Esther immediately stole a motorcycle to go on their mission. Sitting behind Accelerator, Esther remembered the day she woke up in a warehouse. Dr. Datshund had been waiting there, just waiting for her to wake up to throw a skull at Esther, then smile maliciously. Finally, they reached that warehouse. Esther wanted to find a way in, but Accelerator didn't need to. Just breaking through the wall and entering was the quickest way. The two went inside and began to investigate. There was a corpse inside, but it had already been processed very neatly, so even with the ability to read memories, they couldn't get anything. Accelerator moved on to continue searching when they discovered a giant robot, making Esther break out in a cold sweat as she recognized it as Kyong Kai. Inside this robot, Datshund began to greet Esther. It had been a long time, and he never expected Esther would dare to return to this place. Esther fearfully begged him to stop what he was doing. Of course, Datshund wouldn't agree. From the beginning, Esther was the one who taught him how to control corpses for these purposes. Esther fell to her knees, not accepting reality. She did it only wanting happiness, but for Datshund, it was a game. Who would use corpses for personal purposes like him? Esther burst into tears, begging him to stop. It was then that Accelerator spoke up. Datshund immediately recognized him, examining Accelerator carefully. A perfect body, he expressed interest in using Accelerator's body for experiments. Accelerator sighed. He didn't understand people like him, then began to unleash his power. Datshund's robot had already sent him warnings. Looking at the data impressed Datshund. He wondered what was the key that allowed Accelerator to use his ability. He was very curious to know, but currently, fighting Accelerator wouldn't bring him any great benefit, so he decided to retreat. Of course, Accelerator wouldn't let him escape so easily. He activated energy to shoot at him, but the robot quickly created a barrier, completely blocking the attack. Then Datshund reminded Accelerator that to prepare for dealing with him. He had already collected a lot of data. The ability Accelerator used required touching an object to be able to control it. So if he couldn't touch Datshund's robot, his ability would be useless. After that, he shot through the ceiling and disappeared. Esther was still tormenting herself for the sins she had committed. Datshund was right. She wasn't any different from him. She had also controlled corpses to serve personal purposes. Accelerator didn't bother to care and left. The next morning, Misaka eagerly brought food to Accelerator's hospital room. As soon as she saw Esther, the little girl was very curious and pressed forward to ask who Esther was. Esther was about to introduce herself honestly when Accelerator signaled her, so she had to change her answer to being his friend. Of course, Misaka knew full well that Esther and Accelerator were hiding something from her. Hiding a girl and bringing her into the hospital room, and then asking her to buy food for the girl too. Misaka angrily cursed Accelerator for two-timing, then threw the food box in his face. Accelerator wasn't angry but stood up. Misaka immediately hid behind Esther's back and invited the two of them to go out to a restaurant to eat. Although he didn't like going out at all, the lunch was already ruined, so Accelerator had to go. Esther kept staring at Misaka, unable to believe that such a little girl had already gone through 10,000 cycles of death and rebirth. All three quickly made their way to the restaurant. Looking at the menu made Esther's eyes light up. She had never tasted these dishes before, so whenever Esther pointed to a dish, Accelerator would explain it to her, and eventually, they ordered everything. Esther happily chewed a piece and was then fed another by Misaka. At that moment, Esther burst into tears. She had never experienced such a warm meal like this. Indeed, this technology city was beyond her imagination. When it was Esther's turn to feed Misaka back, Accelerator stood up, using the excuse of needing to make a phone call to leave. He had been keeping an eye on that organization. To find them, Accelerator needed someone knowledgeable about the criminal world, so he called directly to the purple-haired sister at the hospital to ask. She knew nothing about this. If she didn't know, then fine. Accelerator hung up and returned to the restaurant, only to find a mess and a letter left by Misaka. Having played too much, the little girl had wet Esther's clothes, so they had returned to the hospital first. Accelerator would come later and pay the bill. Afterward, Accelerator also returned to the room just as Esther was changing clothes. Immediately, Misaka threw a pillow straight at Accelerator's face, not letting him look. Esther didn't understand why Misaka had to be so annoyed. She found it very normal. So Misaka had to teach Esther a lesson about the female body. Just then, the doctor entered the room, calling Misaka for a medical examination. After Misaka left, he turned to discuss with Accelerator the issue of Hasami that the police had asked him to investigate. He had examined her body, but since she had been dead for 3 days, he couldn't investigate much more. He only found a piece of paper hidden in her mouth. which he handed to Accelerator before leaving. Just a glance, and Esther immediately recognized what the doctor had just given was a low-level charm. The two quickly went to the morgue where Hasami's body was placed. Here, Esther began to explain about her ability. Her family created a soul-calling technique capable of attaching souls to corpses, then freely controlling them. Esther took out her charm and placed it on Hasami to check. Indeed, her soul path was still open. If left like this, Hasami's soul would forever drift, unable to reincarnate. So Esther began to use her ability, both to save Hasami and to retrieve the soul she had created to control the corpse. Accelerator sat quietly watching Esther work. At this moment, a hazy image of a brain appeared in the air, making Accelerator very curious to touch it. Immediately, he experienced all of Hasami's past memories, including the part where she was saved by the Day organization and then killed again. Watching this, Accelerator forcibly broke free. Esther hurriedly ran over to check if Accelerator was okay. Casually touching remnant thoughts like this was very dangerous. Accelerator held his head and stood up. Esther checked the corpses once more. Her charm had been successfully activated. Just then, two policemen entered the room. This was not a place for children, so they chased Accelerator and Esther out. Accelerator was strangely obedient, but Esther was a bit worried. She had just placed the charm on the corpse and was only concerned it would sit up while the two officers were still there. Accelerator smiled, gently reminding Esther that wasn't something to worry about now. Inside the morgue, these two police officers revealed their true faces. They weren't anti-skill police, but members of the Day organization sent to destroy Hasami's corpse. When they looked for the vial of decomposing solution, they couldn't find it anywhere. Accelerator laughed and walked into the room. That vial had been in his hand for some time. Accelerator knew these imposters well and opened the vial, throwing it at them. These two also reacted very quickly and dodged to the side. Disciplining bad children was part of their mission. Temporarily putting the corpse aside, they drew their weapons, preparing to fight Accelerator. The two focused on Accelerator without realizing Hasami had sat up right behind them. When they discovered this, they were terrified, unable to believe it. Clearly, she had died by their justice already. Hasami didn't care and only confirmed her target. These two DA members could potentially endanger Esther, so she decided to eliminate them right now. With just one swing of her leg, Hasami had already shattered the floor. The DA member was so scared he had to retreat backward and draw his gun. Hasami detected the danger and immediately went into a defensive stance to avoid danger to important organs. Just as the DA member fired, Accelerator lunged forward, activating his ability to repel all bullets fired at Hasami. Then Accelerator burst out laughing. He had planned to ask them a few questions, but they were so evil they wanted to decompose the corpse of a dead person, so he would have fun with them instead. Accelerator lunged forward, pinning the DA member's head against the wall, then activated his ability to transmit electricity into his body. This one screamed in pain, then passed out from fear. Accelerator was a bit annoyed. Claiming to be a bad guy but fearing death was really disappointing. Well, he'd play with the other one then. Just as Accelerator turned to look at the other one, his vision suddenly began to blur. Accelerator fell to his knees, holding his forehead to check, only to discover his wound had opened again. Esther worriedly ran over to check the situation. Accelerator still wanted to continue fighting, but his body wouldn't allow it, and he passed out shortly after. The DA member smiled, knowing he was lucky to have a chance to escape, so he shot straight at the ceiling where Esther and Accelerator were sitting, forcing Hasami to come save them so he could escape. Hasami pushed away all the debris. Esther hurriedly checked Accelerator's wound. From what Hasami could see, Accelerator wasn't in any life-threatening danger. He just needed adequate rest and would be fine. More importantly, she wanted Esther's opinion on whether to pursue the DA member or not. Esther immediately refused. To her, Accelerator was more important. Outside, that DA member was running for his life. He was about to crash into a little patient girl when a clone of Misaka appeared to stop him. She confirmed he was a criminal who needed to be arrested and went into combat mode. Misaka easily dodged his attack and was about to use electricity to prevent him from moving. But unfortunately, his uniform had insulating capabilities, so Misaka was captured. By then, Esther and Hasami had caught up. The DA member's accomplice had also driven up, urging him to leave. He decided to take the Misaka clone hostage, knocking her out, putting her in the car, and disappearing. Hasami wanted to chase after them, but was stopped by Esther. They would pursue them after they were fully prepared. She didn't want to repeat past mistakes again. In the operating room, Accelerator was also being prepared for surgery. The doctor prepared everything while complaining about Accelerator. He had clearly instructed him not to engage in strenuous activities. Really unbelievable. Outside on the street, this girl, Yuiharu, was standing waiting for a red light when a friend suddenly appeared, lifting her skirt and laughing. It was then that her friend began to tell Yuiharu about an urban legend. She had heard of a train that runs forever, never stopping at any station. Yuiharu didn't believe this story. But the truth is, there was such a train, and it was still running right under their city. On the train, a high-ranking leader of the Da organization had just received a phone call from Dr. Datshund. This time, he called to remind him of some things. Recently, the Da organization had been going too far, notably causing a big commotion at the hospital, and Datshund hoped this would not happen again. After hanging up, Mr. Breaker also thought about this issue. He had thought this Da organization would be useful to him, but perhaps it was time to discard them and bring in a new project. Immediately afterward, he ordered his subordinates to activate the scavenger project. Back at the hospital, Accelerator had regained consciousness. Misaka had been by his side, taking care of him. She wanted to offer Accelerator an apple, but didn't know how to peel it. Accelerator was at a loss and had to ask Misaka to go buy him a can of black coffee. Although the doctor had warned against using stimulants, perhaps for Accelerator, it was just like medicine. So Misaka happily ran off right away. It was then that Misaka's clone appeared. To prevent the original from knowing, she had temporarily stopped sharing information, then gave Accelerator the letter Esther had left. A civilian had been kidnapped, and Esther had to go save her. Just then, Kikyo called, bringing some useful information about the Da group as per Accelerator's request. About that Da group, they would act according to their ideal of justice. Most members of the team were individuals who had been reprimanded for their excessive actions, which is why they had great empathy for each other. They shared all information and technology about themselves with others, and over time, more people joined the organization. So this organization suddenly grew stronger. According to the information Kikyo collected, previously, a city leader had been covering for them. But it seemed now his tail was gradually being exposed, so likely soon this Da group would be eliminated. Kikyo kindly reminded Accelerator that if he wanted to intervene in this matter, he must prepare very carefully. Accelerator burst out laughing. What preparation? Anyone he targeted, he would surely kill with his own hands. On Esther and Hasami's side, they were still searching for traces of the Da group through Hasami's keen sense of smell. Meanwhile, the Da organization was arguing heatedly. These people were increasingly fearless. They were ready to go against the government for their justice, making Datshund quite fed up. Just as he was preparing to leave, he received information about the Misaka clone they had captured. So Datshund immediately called to request to keep her for the next experiment target. At the police station, Yomakawa was actively investigating. The more she monitored, the more surprised she was about the members of this terrorist organization. Their backgrounds were very well hidden, but somehow they were suddenly all exposed now. Yomakawa scrolled a bit more and was startled to realize that among the Da members, there was once an anti-skill police officer. He had disappeared after his student was paralyzed on one side of his body. Why would he join this terrorist organization? Scrolling a bit more, she discovered another anti-skill member. This person had been suspended for illegal weapons transportation. The more she looked, the more Yomakawa sweated, because almost all the dark parts of the anti-skill organization were present here. Just then, a loud explosion rang out, and the police station alarm also rang continuously. The explosion occurred in the District 3 warehouse, making Yomakawa and her teammates quickly take action. On the warehouse side, this was the work caused by the scavenger group. They were hired to eliminate that Da organization. This was just their beginning. They knew this Da group was very numerous, and this warehouse was just a small part. If they had accepted the commission, they must eradicate it at its roots. So a member of the group stepped forward to activate his ability. Immediately, many eyes were launched into the sky, observing the surrounding situation to further identify the positions of the Da group. Finally, they had found their next target. That evening, at the Sukuna Material Supply Factory, the Anti-Skill Police Special Team 1 began their infiltration operation. Several team members moved forward to place mines, then retreated to wait for detonation. Just waiting for the explosion to create an opening, the entire team immediately advanced. The Da group quickly detected them and joined forces to block their way. Both sides engaged in intense gunfire. Their position was currently very close to the freight elevator. Despite the Da's best efforts, the difference in the number of members meant they gradually lost their advantage. Esther and Hasami still had to run at full speed, following the traces of those who had kidnapped the Misaka clone. Meanwhile, Misaka was leisurely recounting her achievement of buying coffee for Accelerator. He didn't care and removed the device from his neck to put it on the charger. But this device was like Accelerator's life source. Just removing it made his entire body lose almost all strength. Accelerator dropped it on the ground, so Misaka quickly picked it up for him, then gave Accelerator some advice. If Accelerator just asked, she would be ready to do anything. Accelerator heard this and smiled. This was exactly why Misaka talked so much, but he never had the heart to chase the little girl away. The police group was firing too fiercely. The Da group had gradually run out of ammunition to fight back, so they had to retreat. Of course, the police group would pursue them very closely. While moving, Yomakawa explained to her teammates about these DA members. Most of them were former anti-skill members, but had been reprimanded for their excessive actions. Hearing her explanation, the young man still didn't understand. Previously, no matter how much they searched for information, they couldn't find anything. But now they just kept appearing, as if the person sheltering them was no longer protecting them. Why was it like this? He found it very puzzling. What purpose did they have? What purpose? For Breaker, a dog that no longer obeyed its master had to be discarded. On Dachshund's side, he had received countless pleas for help from the DA group. The police were pursuing them too aggressively, and they were about to be unable to resist anymore. If this continued, their branch 1 would be completely destroyed. So they begged Dachshund to bring out his secret card. Hearing this, Dachshund was a bit annoyed and cursed at him. In the previous mission, if they had been able to bring back the original Misaka, he would have already completed that secret weapon. This was because they had not fulfilled their mission. But at least now they still had a bit of luck left, because Dachshund had another plan for this situation. Dachshund aimed directly at the Misaka clone they had captured. Although not the original, perhaps she could still be a substitute, then demanded they quickly send that clone to him. Dachshund hung up and stood up. His mouth agreed to save them, but in reality, Dachshund already had the intention to discard this DA group. As soon as the Misaka clone reached his hands, he would discard them immediately. The anti-skill police pushed too hard in the middle, forcing the DA group to stay and defend. While firing back, they cursed at the police group, saying their justice would not be easily subdued here. One of the DA group now received an order to bring the Misaka clone to the designated area without any teammates' support. After knowing this was the way to reverse the situation, they also agreed to complete this mission. Meanwhile, the scavenger group had also confirmed their next target. Not seeing the DA firing back anymore, Yomakawa ordered to push deeper into the tunnel. It was too dark inside, making the police group have to turn on flashlights for continuous checking. Somehow, suddenly appearing in front of them was a giant robot, firing 6 barrels continuously at them. The bulletproof shields had no effect, forcing them to withdraw from the tunnel. It was then that Yomakawa discovered the DA group was escaping via the 2nd floor, so she shouted loudly, calling Ito's name. He immediately understood Yomakawa's intention and pushed her straight up to the 2nd floor to block them. Regardless of what they were planning, Yomakawa bravely rushed forward, pushing 2 men down below, leaving only the one carrying the Misaka clone. Both sides drew their guns, pointing directly at each other's faces. Downstairs, that robot was firing too viciously. The difference in firepower was extremely large, forcing the police team to continuously call for reinforcements. But the other end of the radio wasn't the voice of their teammates, but the voice of the scavenger group. They had come to the factory and killed all those who stayed behind to help them. The one controlling the robot was also losing patience, so he deployed his final plan. From within the robot's body, flying devices began to launch, just a light touch, and the police's bulletproof shields were cut in half. One by one, team members fell, making Yomakawa very confused. This scene was like hell. Just then, paper planes began to appear from somewhere. They flew around those devices and began to explode, destroying everything. As the smoke and dust began to clear, the DA group was startled to realize the scavenger group had arrived. This was a variable they hadn't anticipated at all. But at this point, they could only confront them. The robot controller followed orders and drove the robot straight forward. But somehow it was completely stopped. Clearly, this robot weighed 120 tons. The female leader also happily explained to him before he died. Her ability was to control friction. This robot moved on wheels, so if there was no friction with the ground, how could it move? Unable to advance, this man was forced to retreat. Seeing he showed signs of wanting to flee, the leader immediately pursued. She lightly touched the ground, changing the friction where the robot was standing, making the floor like an ice rink. The robot began to spin wildly, losing direction, unable to be controlled, and crashed straight into the wall. The collision was so strong that the ceiling began to shake and collapse. The man carrying the Misaka clone very quickly received his punishment. He was hit on the head by falling rocks and died instantly. Misaka also began to slide downwards. Seeing this, Yomakawa had to jump to grab her hand, trying to keep Misaka there. But at this moment, the corpse of the DA member also slid down, hitting Misaka, making it impossible for Yomakawa to hold on any longer. Misaka fell straight down. Just when it seemed she was about to die, Esther appeared just in time to save Misaka, then placed her on the ground to check. Fortunately, Misaka wasn't damaged at all. At this moment, the voice of the scavenger group rang out again. They recognized that the person Esther had just saved was their target. They had to thank Esther for saving Misaka safely. They gave Esther one chance to leave Misaka behind, and they would spare her life, or if she persisted, she would die. Just then, Yomakawa with her shield had rushed to stand in front of Esther. After witnessing them kill countless people like that, how could she believe they would spare them? If they wanted to fight, then just come at them. The scavenger group had also gradually lost patience, so a purple-haired girl in the team took on the mission to eliminate Yomakawa. She activated her ability, and immediately the paper pieces in the air gathered around her, creating a battle armor for her that looked very cute. At the hospital, after charging the device for Accelerator, Misaka had also returned to her room. Accelerator sat up and remembered what the Misaka clone had told him. The person the dog group had taken away was very important to him, so how could he let her be in danger? So Accelerator left the hospital room. Misaka had anticipated Accelerator's intention and ran out to question him. Accelerator had to use the excuse of needing to go to the convenience store before she would let him pass. Just as he stepped out of the hospital gate, Accelerator activated his ability, jumping straight onto the roof. From this roof to that roof, he sought the shortest path to his target. With just 4 people, they had defeated an entire giant robot, making Yomakawa sweat with worry. The information about them was almost non-existent, so she was quite sure they came from some secret organization. Naru finished transforming and began to act. She struck the ground with a very strong initial blow, causing the entire building to shake violently. Then Naru burst out laughing, boasting about her strength. Then she jumped back to her teammates, using a member of her group as an example to give Yomakawa a choice of death, breaking each arm on her body, or just decapitating Yomakawa. At this point, Yomakawa questioned why they wanted to go against the police so much. The reason? Naru and her teammates straightforwardly pointed out the mistake for Yomakawa to understand. This academy city was very large. Being a police officer, if she couldn't ensure safety for everyone, it meant she was at fault. And being at fault, she must be eliminated. Naru vowed to eliminate all people like Yomakawa to bring the city back to its orbit. At this point, Yomakawa shouted, denying everything. Indeed, in the anti-skill police, there were some special cases like the Da, but most of her teammates were people willing to risk their lives to protect the city. While reasoning with Naru, suddenly a not yet dead Da member, carrying a gun, rushed out and fired madly at Naru, firing all bullets. But she remained indifferent as if nothing had happened. This one, leave to Yaku to handle. Just saw her take out a vial of solution from her clothes, throwing it straight at the Da member's face, and immediately his body began to freeze, unable to resist. Now Naru just needed to give him one kick to finish him off. Done with the Da member, next was Yomakawa. She worriedly turned to remind Esther to take the Misaka clone away from here immediately. Naru rushed forward to attack Yomakawa. With just one blow, she had already shattered Yomakawa's bulletproof shield. Yomakawa fell to the ground, losing her fighting ability. Just as Naru was about to finish her off, Hasami had received an order from Esther and rushed to stop Naru. Fighting and suddenly having someone obstruct the way made Naru very angry. Naru's 2 teammates just stood watching and directing her. Everyone had their own idea. Some wanted Naru to solve the obstructor first, others wanted Naru to focus on her target. In the end, Naru still chose to fight one-on-one with Yomakawa. Esther supported Yomakawa to the side to avoid obstructing Hasami's fight. She allowed Hasami to release all her strength. Immediately after receiving the order, Hasami went into full power mode. The time this body could endure was limited, so just 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, Hasami had to deal with Naru. The 2 rushed forward to fight. With the advantage of her small body, Hasami easily avoided all of Naru's attacks, then delivered a kick straight to the top of her head. This made Naru very annoyed. Daring to touch her favorite battle costume meant death. She transformed her right arm into paper pieces. Those paper pieces flew out into the air, then turned into nails aiming straight at Hasami. This was Naru's ability to control charms, freely switching between attack and defense. Fighting close combat with Naru was no different from rushing headlong into death. Nevertheless, Hasami still had to rush up to attack. She had tried her best to dodge, but the number of nails was too large, coming from blind spots too. Hasami took a hit to her thigh, then was kicked by Naru and crashed into the wall. The severity of this wound was level 4. Even if Hasami tried to fight more, there wasn't much time left. Esther watched worriedly, not knowing what to do. She concentrated, determined to find some way to reverse the situation. Just as Naru rushed forward to finish off Hasami, the unexpected happened. If Naru had battle armor, Esther also created armor for Hasami. Naru's armor was made of paper, while Hasami's armor was created by Esther from earth, so its hardness was definitely stronger than Naru's armor. Hasami had easily overpowered Naru. At this point, Hawkong spoke up with advice for Naru. Earth could still be easily penetrated by humans. Naru immediately understood her meaning. She gathered her paper together and created an earth-digging machine, rushing towards Hasami. However, this machine was too bulky, unable to keep up with Hasami's speed, making Hawkong switch to another plan. This time, she ordered Naru to target Esther first, and indeed, they forced Hasami to appear and stop that grinding machine. Hasami's earth armor was gradually penetrated by the machine. Even with just bare hands left, she still tried her best to prevent the machine from harming Esther. At this point, Esther helplessly fell to her knees, bursting into tears. This wasn't justice at all. Why did they want to kill so many people? Naru's grinding machine kept pushing forward. At the most critical moment, Accelerator appeared, with just one blow shattering Naru's tattered machine. Looking into Accelerator's eyes made Hakong startled, because in them were mixed both the fury and madness of his, which was very similar to the scavenger group. So Hakong invited Accelerator to join their team. Accelerator turned to scold Esther, then told them to quickly leave this place. Seeing Accelerator not responding to her made Hakong a bit annoyed. She jumped straight down to question Accelerator. Immediately, Accelerator activated his ability, dragging Hakong to roll right under his feet. Then the Da's giant robot was also flung by him up into the sky, falling straight onto Hakong's head. At this point, the scavenger group hurriedly ran to save their group leader. Then they sweated profusely when they realized Accelerator was no amateur, not someone they could touch. So they began to have conflicting opinions. Some wanted to flee, others wanted to fight because if they ran, they would fail the mission and be demoted. Everyone listened to Hakong. She ordered everyone to prepare the group's combined attack. Up until now, no one had been able to withstand this move. After unifying, they began their work. First, Naru threw the leader to where Accelerator was standing. With her friction skills, the leader controlled the ground, forcing Accelerator to stand still in one place. Right after that, Naru also used her paper to create a torture box, locking Accelerator inside. Just waiting for this, Yaku took out her specially formulated super strong solution and put it into the statue's mouth. The temperature reaction from inside and outside differed greatly. She estimated the temperature that Accelerator was currently enduring was about -4,000 degrees Celsius, so Accelerator would surely die. At this moment, Esther returned to look at the scene before her, making her desperate and falling to her knees. This made the scavenger group very smug, but immediately after, Accelerator slapped them in the face. They thought the combined attack would be something, but it was just that. Accelerator shattered the torture box, then bent down, telling them to finish whatever tricks they had left. This made all four of them turn pale with fear again. Seeing them standing motionless, Accelerator also understood they were out of toys, so he lunged down, targeting the leader first. Naru angrily rushed forward to attack Accelerator, suffering the same fate. Yaku tried to shake Hakong, asking about the next battle plan. But at this point, Hakong was also at a loss, because she had recognized Accelerator's identity. They were currently facing the strongest Esper in Academy City, so how could they possibly win? Accelerator appeared in front of Yaku, making her panic and immediately run away. The more she ran, the more she died. Yaku was beaten even more miserably than the other two. Now only Hakong was left. Frightened by Accelerator's wild eyes, she fainted shortly after. On the pink-haired doctor's side, she had also monitored the entire process. Among the 2 million residents of the city, how did they end up encountering the strongest Esper here? This time, they suffered a very heavy defeat. Accelerator also discovered the hidden camera and kicked it broken immediately. At this moment, Esther and Hasami ran over to check on him. Accelerator just sighed, thinking this time out he would get to fight a satisfying battle. But these kids were too weak. At this point, Dr. Dachshund was still sitting with his leg up, working on his research. It was almost complete now, just waiting for the final test specimen to arrive. As for Esther, she could only slump down and sigh. She had tried her best, but in the end, the result was still the same. Just then, Hasami brought the Misaka clone to her. Esther also understood the problem and quickly activated her ability to check on her. For now, Misaka was still safe, with no life-threatening danger. At the same time, Esther also had to thank Accelerator for saving her. Without his timely appearance, they would now be just corpses. Looking at it, it seemed Accelerator had thoroughly defeated the scavenger group. But the issue was that none of them had very serious injuries. Most were just unconscious. On the outside, Accelerator looked like a raging monster. But inside, he was very warm and wanted to help people. Hearing these things made Accelerator a bit uncomfortable, turning to tell Esther to stop making things up. But Esther dared to assert that what she said was the truth. With all her courage, she stepped up to Accelerator and asked him to accept her as his disciple. Accelerator looked at Esther in confusion, and of course, he would not agree to this unreasonable request. Following Esther's orders, Hasami also joined in, preventing Accelerator from leaving, then pleading along with Esther. The two of them clung on like leeches, unaware that the Misaka clone was becoming a target. Esther and Hasami talked too much, making Accelerator frustrated. He activated his ability and pushed them away, then followed up with a blow straight to the robot's body as a warning. He didn't care what purpose Esther wanted to be his disciple for, but if she continued to follow him, he would not hold back anymore. Esther was still very stubborn because this was what she needed to do. She needed to become Accelerator's disciple to save this world. She alone was not enough to stop that Dachshund, so she needed power. At this moment, the police officer Yomakawa and the Misaka clone had also regained consciousness. They were very confused by Esther's stalking behavior. After discovering Esther was injured, they immediately ran over to provide first aid. Esther broke free from their hands and ran after Accelerator, begging him again. At this point, Accelerator didn't want to respond to her anymore. About that Dachshund, he also made Accelerator a bit uncomfortable, so Accelerator vowed to find and erase him. If Esther liked, she could come along. Just then, Accelerator suddenly sensed something unusual and stopped. From the sky above, a giant robot plunged down. As soon as it landed, it immediately went into combat mode, startling Esther when she realized this robot was equipped with a type of soul charm even more advanced than the one she used to control Hasami. Esther quickly retreated, preparing to fight, while Accelerator wasn't scared at all and just moved forward. Regardless of what abilities they had, he would handle them all. The robot began to fire missiles. With his ability, Accelerator was very confident they couldn't hit him. But somehow Accelerator, who was in front, suddenly appeared behind the robot. This was a teleportation ability, which was a bit troublesome. The missiles headed towards Esther, forcing Hasami to step in and save her. At this moment, another robot appeared. "Two robots trying to defeat me?" Accelerator taunted them. From inside the robot came a voice that Esther immediately recognized. This was Hasami, whom she needed to free. Not just two, but three. They were surrounded on all sides, and the target they aimed for this time was the Misaka clone. The little girl had been captured by a newly appeared robot. Yomikawa was startled and drew her gun, but couldn't stop it. Having obtained their target, they immediately fled. Of course, Accelerator wouldn't let them escape so easily and gave chase. Esther also ordered Hasami to pursue, but Hasami advised Esther to reconsider. With a normal person's body, Hasami felt that even if they caught up, they couldn't do anything against those robots. Esther helplessly recalled her order. After that, Yomikawa also reported back to headquarters, receiving orders to temporarily suspend the mission. She then turned to Esther, curious. Clearly, the girl named Hasami had already died. Seeing this, Esther had to explain to Yomikawa. Correctly, the real Hasami had died, and her body was being controlled by a fake soul created by Esther herself. Although Yomikawa might not believe in such irrational things, in this situation, she didn't want to delve deeper. More importantly, Yomikawa wanted to know about those giant robots. Meanwhile, Dachshund returned to his laboratory, seeing Hasami had just accomplished a feat and praising the little girl profusely, then had to squint his eyes when he saw Accelerator chasing after the robots Hasami controlled. On Yomikawa's side, Esther had now revealed everything. Those robots they had just encountered were controlled through a soul-calling method that she and that Dachshund had created. However, inside those robots were not ordinary souls, but more dangerous things called evil spirits number. These were special souls adjusted through many generations in Esther's clan. As soon as a body received a number soul, it would display all the inherent power of that body, exceeding even the current owner, making it dangerous. Accelerator pursued the robots very closely when suddenly they stopped. Dachshund now spoke up, greeting him, then boasting to Accelerator about these new test specimens of his. Unlike the robot Accelerator had faced before, this time his new models had been upgraded to level 5 power, on the same level as Accelerator. Let's see what Accelerator could do. Level 5. So what? Accelerator didn't hesitate and lunged straight forward to attack. And just like the old confrontation, he couldn't touch the robot's body because Dachshund had designed a barrier to block all of Accelerator's abilities. Not being able to touch meant Accelerator's manipulation ability had no effect. Then he burst out laughing, taunting Accelerator, immediately afterward getting slapped in the face when his robot suddenly collapsed due to losing a leg. Of course, this was Accelerator's doing, blocking just a part, because his ability was to manipulate everything in this world. As long as there was force, somehow it would hit. The more he watched Accelerator fight, the more impressed Dachshund became. He only wished he could put Accelerator's corpse into his test specimens. At that point, who knew what perfect thing would be born? This greeting was just to this point. He controlled all robots to fly back. Accelerator immediately gave chase, but the barrier layer this guy designed was too annoying. Accelerator couldn't touch them to rescue the Misaka clone. On Esther's side, she had now regained her determination. Everything happening in the city was her fault, so Esther had to be there to definitively resolve this sin. Esther ignored Yomikawa's advice and left with Hasami. Meanwhile, this cunning Dachshund had begun uploading the memory data of the Misaka clone. By now, Accelerator had caught up. Just a little bit of data had already given Dachshund countless interesting insights. In the past, these Misaka clones had been massacred in masses by Accelerator. Yet now, just for one clone, Accelerator had to put himself in danger. Dachshund burst out laughing, taunting Accelerator. By this point, Accelerator was also at his peak of annoyance. For those he hated, he vowed to personally break every bone in Dachshund's body. Since the data had not yet been fully uploaded, Dachshund once again played the chase game with Accelerator. On Esther's side, she and Hasami didn't chase after Accelerator but went to another place because Esther understood that even if she chased, she would only get in Accelerator's way. So she stayed here to do what she needed to do. Esther just took out a short knife and stabbed it straight into the ground. With extreme determination, she would stop the crime of that Dachshund. Turning back time a bit to when Esther was still cooperating with Dachshund, he had cherished a dream of creating a level 6 Esper. Level 5 was already very powerful, making Hasami curious about how terrifying level 6 would be. Perhaps almost immortal, even nuclear weapons couldn't do anything to that person. Dachshund wasn't sure about this, but currently, he had found the key to his dream. Dachshund led Hasami to meet Esther. Immediately, Hasami rushed forward, asking everything. Seeing that Esther could speak Japanese startled the little girl. At this point, Esther was curious about everything around. All were research objects of Dachshund. Previously, his research had reached an impasse, so he had to bring out ancient tools for assistance. Even with explanation, Esther didn't understand, so Dachshund gave up. Seeing Hasami talking too much made him uncomfortable, and he immediately chased the little girl away. Of course, Hasami wouldn't obediently listen. The little girl still clung to Esther, expressing her wish for Esther to cooperate with them to fulfill the desire to create the world's first level 6 Esper. After Hasami left, Dachshund brought out his research robot and began to explain everything to Esther. About Esther's ability, that was the soul calling technique, which could control corpses. However, seeing a robot with nothing to do with her technique made Esther very confused. At this point, Dachshund pulled out a human model. He planned to inject a drug that would paralyze the brain and other parts of the body. If they could still use their ability in that condition, then their research would be considered complete. Esther was completely befuddled and pointed at the robot. What did that have to do with upgrading to a level 6 Esper? Hearing this, Dachshund could only smile. Indeed, it had nothing to do with it at all. He explained so vaguely that Esther became stressed. The next day, standing on a bridge, she was racking her brains, trying to understand Dachshund's words, but even thinking until her brain was exhausted, she still couldn't figure it out. So Esther, annoyed, stripped in the middle of the crowd, planning to jump into the lake for a swim to cool her head. At this moment, Hasami appeared and stopped Esther. Casually stripping like there was no one around, Esther would surely be ogled by people. If she wanted to bathe, she should find another place. Then Hasami pulled Esther to the gym and pushed her into the bathroom. Esther was a bit naive about the technology in this city. Even the shower made her startled when she turned it on. After showering, Esther came out to find Hasami had replaced her clothes with different ones and was punching a punching bag. Seeing Esther, Hasami immediately showed off the outfit she was wearing. Hasami had personally chosen that outfit for Esther as a meeting gift. After the meeting with Hasami, Esther had returned to the laboratory. Hasami didn't follow because she had been sent home by Dachshund. A research friend of Dachshund was also present. This person began to remind Dachshund about the next projects. Without specimens, they couldn't continue their research, so he wanted Dachshund to recruit more volunteers. Indeed, this was the only way for them to continue their research. Currently, in society, there were many young girls drifting and owing a lot of money. Those were the targets Dachshund aimed to invite to participate in this research. Afterward, he turned to call Esther, reporting to her about the research process. Just now, while observing the ability to store power, he had discovered a very interesting point. When humans became unconscious, the power they released would become much stronger. This made Dachshund guess that perhaps their own bodies were restraining that power. The larger the device serving the body, the stronger the power emitted. So Dachshund had tried to find where the limit was, and also realized that when they made it too big, it would cause the person's body to lose its inherent consciousness. And this was Esther's part of the job. Dachshund wanted Esther to find a way to control the consciousness of the test specimen. If she could do that, he could create a serving device as large as he wanted. After the conversation with Dachshund, Esther returned to find Hasami alone, eating a giant ice cream cup. Seeing Esther, the little girl immediately invited her to join. At this point, Esther sadly confided in Hasami. She had thought a lot about the soul-calling ability in her clan. Because she didn't understand exactly what it needed to be used for, Esther had responded to the call and came here to assist Dachshund. But currently, Esther still couldn't find the answer she desired. Hasami smiled, ran over, and grabbed Esther's hand. Everyone had their own wishes. Hasami's wish was to help her brother Dachshund fulfill his dream of creating a level 6 Esper. Thus, a promise between the two girls was formed. They intertwined their fingers, promising to help each other wholeheartedly. After that, they went to the laboratory together. Hasami wanted to offer herself as a research subject for Dachshund. Of course, being her brother, Dachshund couldn't let the little girl be in danger. At least until he fully grasped all the necessary information to upgrade to level 6 superpower. At the earliest, it would take a year, and at the latest, 2 years. At that time, Dachshund could confidently let Hasami participate in the research. Hearing this, Hasami sadly ran out of the laboratory. Despite Esther's efforts to explain, Dachshund adamantly disagreed. The little Hermie stopped by a grocery store. With her computer skills, she hacked the system and took an item from the anti-skill police. Just then, Hermie coughed violently and vomited blood. Knowing she had no more time, Hermie made the life-changing decision. She found a secluded place and set up a camera for a monologue. Maybe by the time Esther and Dachshund knew about this video, she would already be dead. But this death would not be meaningless. Hermie had been very sick. When she knew her brother was experimenting to create a level 6 super Esper, Hermie had a glimmer of hope to continue living. But when she learned it would take up to 2 years for Dachshund to complete the project, Hermie could no longer wait. She decided to end her life right there, so her brother could use her body for experiments. Even with just a 1% chance of success, Hermie still hoped to help her brother after her death. Looking at Hermie's corpse, Dachshund's entire world seemed to collapse. Esther was also very sad but quickly regained her spirit, because she had promised to help fulfill Hermie's wish. About Esther's soul-controlling technique, she could put another soul into Hermie's body, thereby helping her body not decompose. This was immediately rejected by Dachshund. If Hermie was no longer Hermie, then what was the point? So Dachshund had to take a risk, putting Hermie's body into the robot, and indeed it had an effect. Hermie's voice rang out, delighting him. Just then, Dachshund's friend rushed into the laboratory, seeing that Dachshund finally agreed to use Hermie for research, giving him a compliment. However, Dachshund understood too well what this guy meant. He picked up a screwdriver from the ground and raised it threateningly. Level 6 or whatever, he didn't care anymore. At this point, he just wanted to save Hermie and leave this laboratory. Just then, Hermie's body signal was gradually weakening. Her heart was no longer beating, confusing Dachshund greatly. Clearly, Hermie had just been talking to him. Just as he finished speaking, the giant robot had already knocked Dachshund unconscious first. Then it aimed straight at his friend. For her, just one person who knew how to experiment was enough. The guards were startled and began firing continuously, but couldn't scratch the robot at all. Hermie was too violent, making Esther feel something was wrong. Esther hurriedly took out her charms to check and found one missing. Seeing that Esther had discovered it, Hermie didn't bother hiding anymore. The real Hermie had died, and the one controlling Hermie's body was a soul named Taowu, created from Esther's charm. Esther was very angry that this guy was impersonating Hermie, but Taowu didn't care. From the beginning, its plan was to pretend to be Hermie to deceive Dachshund into helping it upgrade to a level 6 superpower. It threw Esther a handcuff and threatened her. If she didn't cooperate with it, then every time Esther failed to resist, it would kill one guard in this room. Left with no choice, Esther had to comply. She knew that all that remained of Hermie was just memories. Although it was very painful to make the decision, this was what Esther needed to do. Returning to the present, Esther had prepared her final plan. With this knife, if she could just touch Hermie's body, then that Taowu charm would also lose its effect. The Misaka clone was getting close. His dream of creating a level 6 Esper was about to become reality. At this moment, Hermie asked her brother what Dachshund would do next after completing this project. Dachshund thought for a while and then had an answer. This was already his biggest dream, so after completing the project, he just wanted to return to a peaceful life. Hearing this, Hermie smiled very brightly. She thought the same as Dachshund. As long as he was here, she would be here too. On the robot's side, Accelerator was still pursuing them very strictly. They fired cannon shots continuously, but what effect could that have against Accelerator's ability to manipulate everything? Very quickly, Accelerator caught up to the machine imprisoning the Misaka clone. He punched the robot repeatedly, though not causing too much damage to it. But the hardware inside, due to the external impact, had shifted away from Misaka's body, preventing her data from being transmitted to Dachshund. This made him start to panic, not knowing what to do now, when Hermie spoke up, suggesting a very good way. She controlled the 3 robots to plunge straight into Academy City. After determining Accelerator's direction of movement, Hermie had the robots open fire without any regard for the residential areas here. They took advantage of the tall buildings to cover the robot transporting the Misaka clone back. Accelerator was a bit annoyed with this crazy plan of theirs. Don't think covering your face means you can escape him. Accelerator activated his ability to control rocks and threw them straight at the robot shooting at him. It collapsed immediately, and then Accelerator burst out laughing. This way, there was no one left to hinder him from pursuing that robot. On Dachshund's side, the transport robot had returned. He plugged the data transmission cable into the Misaka clone and sat waiting, percentage by percentage. Just as the data reached 99%, Accelerator broke through the wall. Seeing the Misaka clone tightly bound, he approached and took her down. The real Misaka woke up at this moment, thinking Accelerator had come to visit her. Looking around for a while and not seeing Accelerator anywhere, she thought she was dreaming. Dachshund and Hermie stepped forward, applauding Accelerator. Indeed worthy of being a level 5 Esper, Accelerator's destructive power was truly beyond imagination. Accelerator put the Misaka clone down and cursed at him. Just hearing his voice through the robot, he already felt this guy was hateful. Now seeing his face made him even more detestable. Dachshund raised his hand to stop Accelerator. At least he should hear his explanation first. The 3 robots Accelerator had just faced, the souls placed inside them were only level 3. But thanks to Dachshund's research and Esther's soul calling technique, they had been raised to level 5. Even so, they still couldn't fight against Accelerator. But that was only until now. Things were different now. The Misaka clone's data had been fully copied by him. Dachshund brought out a machine. He only needed to press a button, and the data would be transferred entirely to the robots Accelerator had just fought. Of course, they wouldn't be as weak as before. There was no way Accelerator would let him have his way. He picked up a stone and threw it, breaking the man's controller. Dachshund laughed again, reminding Accelerator that actually, the data had already been transmitted. Just as he finished speaking, the robots Accelerator had defeated stood up once more. Dachshund was very confident in their newly upgraded power, so he handed everything over and left with Hasami. Before that, he didn't forget to remind Accelerator of an issue. The data just now was originally prepared for Hasami. Soon, Hasami would become the world's strongest level 6 Esper. By that time, Accelerator should prepare himself. The Misaka clone had obtained weapons and wanted to fight Accelerator, but was then chased away. After all that he had done to them, Accelerator didn't want to repeat that again, so he kept his distance. Accelerator aimed straight at the robot and charged forward, but somehow, in the blink of an eye, he had been teleported back to where he had defeated the robot in the city. On the Misaka clone's side, Dachshund laughed out loud, boasting about the new abilities the robots had received. Initially, that ability only allowed it to teleport small objects, but after the upgrade, this robot could not only teleport Accelerator, but even itself could teleport right to the battlefield to greet him. The Misaka clone didn't bother listening to Dachshund's nonsense anymore and ran out of the laboratory, while this guy had started transferring data into Hasami's body. Soon, she would become a level 6 Esper. 2 scrap metal robots trying to stop me, Accelerator laughed loudly, declaring he would beautifully deal with these 2 robots. Next would be Accelerator, and he began to charge up to attack. With its teleportation ability, the touty robot flew and jumped everywhere, from front to back, attacking Accelerator continuously, though not causing any damage at all. Misaka had now run up to a building to observe Accelerator's battle. Just then, Esther and Hasami also arrived. Esther urged the Misaka clone to quickly reveal Dachshund's whereabouts, so she could end this matter one final time. After receiving Misaka's information, Esther and Hasami rushed into Dachshund's laboratory. He detected this, but currently, Hasami still needed to transmit about 20% more data, so he left the Hundun robot to block Esther's way for him. As for Accelerator, fighting continuously with a robot that only knew how to teleport made him feel bored. Following Accelerator's loud laughter, a whirlwind began to form under his feet. The whirlwind grew larger and larger, startling even the Misaka clone. Here, Accelerator was using the friction of sand to release a huge amount of heat in this whirlwind, and the target for this fire tornado was the vision of the touty robot. Unable to identify the target, it could no longer teleport Accelerator. Having lost its trump card, it was just like a pile of scrap metal for Accelerator to trample on. Having dealt with the first one, now only one was left. Losing the ability to teleport, this robot could only confront Accelerator directly. And facing him directly, what chance of winning was there? So Accelerator utilized the scaffolding on the rooftop, throwing everything at the robot's body, locking up the joints on its body, causing it to collapse immediately. At this moment, Dachshund's voice rang out, giving Accelerator a compliment. These 2 robots, although enhanced, were still no match for Accelerator. He was truly impressed with Accelerator, but these 2 robots had done their job of buying time very well. Hasami's data upload was almost complete. By then, a level 6 Esper would appear to crush Accelerator. Accelerator didn't bother listening anymore and directly stomped the speaker, then rushed to Dachshund's laboratory. This guy didn't show any fear at all because he knew that even if Accelerator went at full force or took shortcuts, he still couldn't arrive in time to stop him. He laughed out loud, waiting for his achievement, not knowing that Esther was right behind him, with the Shun Emperor knife in her hand. If she could stab Hasami, she could separate the Taowu soul from the little girl's body. With only one opportunity, Esther was very calm, waiting for the right moment, but then clumsily bumped into a can on the ground, causing it to roll and make a noise. Left with no choice, Esther had to rush forward to attack. The commotion was too loud, making Dachshund discover her. His lifetime research achievement couldn't be so easily destroyed by Esther, so he used his body to block Esther's knife, then laughed loudly as the data upload was complete. After checking that Hasami was still safe, Dachshund collapsed. At this moment, Hasami had opened her eyes. The first person the little girl saw was Esther, and she greeted her. Esther was bewildered, not responding, only telling herself that Hasami was truly dead. It was Taowu controlling the little girl's body. It couldn't deceive her. Just then, Hermie discovered the bloody knife in Esther's hand, and beside her, Dachshund was clutching his wound. Piecing everything together, Hermie understood the issue and became angry. Cable wires began to gather around Hermie's body according to her ability. Soon, she would become the first level 6 Super Esper. Outside the laboratory, the remnants of the Da group were fighting with the police. Feeling their firepower was insufficient, they were forced to retreat inside. Of course, the police group also pursued. Just as they stepped into the building, countless bizarre tentacles appeared and attacked them. These were all Hermie's abilities. These tentacles extended outside the building, aiming straight at the Misaka clone. The little girl had activated electric shock to try to stop it, but the Misaka clone was too weak to do anything more. Just as she was about to be captured, Accelerator appeared, saving her life. Inside the laboratory, Hasami had also returned to Esther. She grabbed Esther and fled immediately. Esther, still very loyal, also dragged Dachshund along with her. The three hid in the elevator. Here, Dachshund thanked Esther. Although during the research process they had some disagreements, in the end, it was completed. His sister Hermie now had a new superior body. Esther gritted her teeth, denying this, trying to explain to Dachshund that it wasn't Hermie but Tawu. Dachshund wouldn't believe it because he had checked and rechecked. As a brother, how could Dachshund not recognize his own sister? Seeing Esther still being stubborn, Dachshund let Esther go and ask his sister herself. At this moment, Hermie appeared to answer the question. Her attitude and expression of bursting into tears upon seeing Dachshund injured were indeed very similar to her, making Esther uncertain what was true anymore. Suddenly, Hermie collapsed, her attitude changing 180 degrees. The little girl began to analyze Dachshund's wound. Too much blood loss. Survival time only 11 minutes left. Dachshund had no more use, so it decided to erase Hermie's memory from this body. Only now did it reveal the truth to Dachshund. It was Tawu, not his sister Hermie. Then it turned to congratulate Esther, saying it had completed her clan's wish for her. Esther was very angry and scolded Tawu back. As a soul summoned by her, it should obey her commands. How could it act on its own like this? Tawu immediately rebutted that for it, the clan's wish was paramount, and after 400 years, that wish was finally very close. Tawu also revealed to Hermie that on the first day it was awakened, a voice wanted to talk to it. After a few seconds of deliberation, it decided to engage. That voice called itself the devil, and the devil had asked Tawu to fulfill the clan's wish. Tawu bent down close to Esther and reminded her if she still remembered what her clan's wish was. This, Esther always kept in her mind, as every member of the clan had been taught since childhood. Her entire clan had always wanted to create a perfect golem. On a beautiful day, the founder Obed came up with a method, using soul calling technique on corpses to create golems. However, this method was too extreme for others, so it wasn't accepted, and Obed was expelled from his homeland with the name of a heretic. But that wasn't enough to stop Obed's great desire. So generation after generation, Esther's clan developed this summoning technique further. They could draw charms, inside which were the 4 great evil spirits that Esther currently possessed. However, that was still not Obed's original purpose. What Esther's clan aimed for was to create a perfect golem. At a time when they didn't know how to create this creature, that devil showed Tawu a way. By dying and being reborn 10,000 times, its soul would evolve. Of course, Tawu didn't have the ability to resurrect, so it had replaced these 10,000 deaths with the Misaka clone's data. Hearing this, Esther couldn't stand it anymore. She was taught not to use the summoning technique to play with death. What Tawu was doing was against the clan's regulations. If it was still a member of the clan, it had to obey her orders. Esther commanded Tawu to stop cooperating with that devil immediately. Surprisingly, Tawu agreed. Just when Esther thought it was over, Tawu burst out laughing. It was just playing with her. Then it stuck out its tongue to show Esther a charm. It turned out that the one called the devil was the 4th generation clan leader of Esther's clan. Before death, he had merged his soul with Tawu. Since then, he had lived for a very long time, and during that time, sought ways to fulfill his own wish. A bit of Isaac's past. This guy's bizarre experiments were extremely horrific. Soldiers who came to arrest him all became fodder for the army of corpses he created. This guy was truly a devil, and Isaac, when called so by others, showed great interest. 400 years had passed, and his experimental endeavors had reached an impasse, until he learned that the Misaka clone had gone through 10,000 deaths. Then his opportunity had also arrived. Isaac began to attack Esther and Hasami. Esther burst into tears, trying to beg him to stop. She didn't want anyone else to die. Hearing this made Isaac very angry, and he cursed back at Esther, always blaming others without realizing that Esther herself was the cause of everything. If she hadn't appeared before Hermie as a summoner, Hermie wouldn't have had to commit suicide. For a summoner, playing with corpses was their true nature. Being from the clan, didn't Esther understand that? Isaac considered Esther a failure in the clan, so there was no need to keep her around anymore. He launched an attack to finish them all off right there. Fortunately, Hasami reacted quickly enough and pulled Esther and Dachshund away. Just at this moment, Accelerator had also appeared on the battlefield. Hermes' body was growing larger and larger. It began to create a giant tree piercing the sky. Outside the laboratory, although very dangerous, the anti-skill police still had to deploy forces here under government orders. As for Esther, though saved, she no longer wanted to live. What Isaac said was indeed correct. She had been wrong from the beginning when she let little Hermes misunderstand her summoning technique. Accelerator didn't bother caring why Esther was sad. He came here to find the person he wanted to fight. If Esther wanted to withdraw now, he wouldn't stop her. So just sit here and witness how he would personally smash this hateful Isaac to pieces. People in the city were terrified when that tree began to appear before them. Hermes was expanding more and more to receive more data sources. This was her final step. Just a little more and the clan's wish would be fulfilled. A god-level golem would descend upon this city. Accelerator stepped in front of her, showing disgust. I thought it would be something, but it turns out you want to turn into this horrific form. Horrific? Isaac immediately rebutted. To him, this was God, the wish of his clan for 400 years. A golem with a perfect body and perfect soul. Wasn't that also the desire of all the Spurs in this city? That was just what Isaac thought. In reality, Accelerator didn't care. Although he knew there were still a few mad scientists aiming for this, for Accelerator, it was impossible, so he didn't pay much attention to it. For Isaac, those studies had helped him a lot. He had searched the world for many years, and only in this city could he obtain the Misaka clone's data. Data that had gone through over 10,000 deaths. Accelerator's expression immediately changed when Isaac mentioned this. After obtaining the data, Isaac knew it was Accelerator who had created these 10,000 deaths, so he began to taunt him. At this point, Accelerator was very angry. That is Misaka's memory, her own memory. I don't allow anyone to use it for personal purposes. Accelerator activated his ability, lunged forward, and grabbed Isaac's head. Fresh blood spurted out, but somehow he could still survive. Accelerator didn't care how many times this guy could regenerate. He would crush him. Accelerator controlled the debris around him and threw it all at Isaac. Despite this, he wasn't injured at all. On the contrary, he created more duplicates to taunt Accelerator. Playing to this point is enough. There was still a little time before he could become a god. Before leaving, he gave Accelerator advice. If he still wanted to live, run now while there was still time. At this moment, Esther's group arrived. Looking at the scene before her, Esther could only helplessly fall to her knees, with Isaac's admonishing words still echoing in her head. She truly couldn't know why she came here, why she was born to bear the mistakes of her entire clan like this. Misaka came forward, curiously asking Esther. According to what Isaac said, the thing just now was the wish of her entire clan. Was that really God? Accelerator immediately denied it. There is no God whatsoever, it's just a perverted monster. Then he asked Esther back, what would be her next target? Life belonged to Esther, and the choice was hers. If she wanted to be a hero, she shouldn't be confused about what she wanted to protect. If Esther didn't even know who she wanted to protect, she would never find redemption. Esther trembled as she raised her hand, then suddenly remembered the promise between her and Hermes, a promise to support each other. Then Esther took out her emperor knife and asked for Accelerator's help. To defeat that monster, she needed to use this knife to stab into its main body. To do that, Accelerator had to support her. Accelerator agreed immediately, and they all began to move into the laboratory. Outside, Yomakawa's police group was still positioned, waiting for orders. But seeing the monster expanding more and more, Yomakawa was very anxious. She wanted to attack immediately, but was held back by her teammates. The order only forbade them from acting rashly, not from observing. For now, they had to continue monitoring. Accelerator's group moved inside the laboratory. Somehow, Dachshund, who was just outside, was now in front of them. Although seriously injured, Dachshund still had things to do. Daring to turn his sister into a monster, he couldn't forgive Isaac. The Misaka clone accompanying them was still very worried, not knowing if they could defeat that monster. Esther was very confident in her emperor knife. This was a type of weapon born to counter rebellious souls like that. But it also had its difficulties. When the monster's body was too large, Esther wasn't sure she could find the charm's position in that massive body. Accelerator found it too troublesome. Just blowing up that body would suffice. Esther immediately denied this. As long as the charm was still in the body, Isaac would continuously regenerate. Dachshund now took on the mission to lead them to him, as he was most familiar with the paths in this laboratory. There was still a little time before he completely merged with the experiment, so they had to hurry. Dachshund opened the elevator door for everyone to enter. His body was already very weak. He knew he couldn't live much longer, but before dying, at least he still had to reclaim his sister Hermes from that monster. Accelerator smiled, praising him. Even being a bad guy, he still had something he wanted to protect, so Accelerator would respect this decision of his. Dachshund immediately denied what he had done. Even until now, he still felt it was the right decision, just that there was a little mistake, and he would fix it right now. Outside the laboratory, the police group was piloting drones to scout the situation. The more they looked at those tentacles of the monster, the more they shuddered. Sitting here looking like this, they couldn't know what Isaac's true purpose was. Accelerator's group was now moving deeper into the laboratory. This place seemed to have become Isaac's body already, looking very horrific, making the Misaka clone a bit scared. Seeing this, Accelerator gave her advice. If she was too scared, she didn't need to come along anymore. The group continued walking, unaware that all their actions were being monitored by Isaac. Only Accelerator seemed to sense his presence. This guy's evolution work had begun to encounter problems as the speed was too slow. Initially, Isaac thought that with memory and the life source in this city, he would become perfect, but this was too slow. He couldn't wait anymore, so he had to switch to another plan. In the building, there were still some DA members hiding, and these would be his new source of nutrition. Even Accelerator's group and the anti-skill police were targeted by them. The cries for help from teammates continuously rang out, making Yomikawa very anxious. She made the decision to disobey orders and go rescue her teammates, because before becoming a police officer, she had once been a teacher. She was taught to always help other suffering people. The police who followed Yomikawa also lunged forward together. At this point, it didn't matter whether the DA were enemies or not. Both sides cooperated to fight against these tentacles. Inside the laboratory, Accelerator had also engaged in battle against those tentacles, but at this moment, a horde of zombies appeared. Esther gripped the knife tightly in her hand, but couldn't bring herself to strike. Accelerator was different. For him, these were already dead people. He ruthlessly dealt with them and reminded Esther, this wasn't the work of a hero, but of a bad person, so just leave all of these to him. The more he fought, the more they kept coming, making Accelerator a bit annoyed. At this point, he turned to ask Esther if they had reached the laboratory yet. Esther checked the signal. They were very close now, but the problem was that Isaac's body was becoming larger, his power increasing accordingly, so they didn't have much time left. The device on Accelerator's neck also began to alert. Accelerator's time was also running out, so he would finish off Isaac here. Finally, Esther had found the exact location of Isaac's body, but when Accelerator wanted to rush inside, an electromagnetic field appeared. Isaac had completed the final step of evolution. His power now had to be equal to God's. They all were overwhelmed by this terrifying power. Even Accelerator couldn't resist it. Inside the building, there were still a few remaining DA members. They fiercely fought to the death against Isaac's tentacles, but they had no chance. Their flesh and blood became nutrition for him. The more he absorbed, the stronger he became. The range was no longer just in the research area. The tentacles began to extend, infiltrating the city. Isaac laughed out loud as if in a good harvest. Finally, after all these years, he had fulfilled his wish. With this power, he was even above the gods. Just then, suddenly a voice rang out in Isaac's head. The will of this voice wanted Isaac to use his power to protect absolute justice for the city. Isaac began to panic, not understanding what was happening, then was controlled by this voice. Thanks to this, the energy barrier at where Accelerator was standing also disappeared. Not needing to know what had just happened, Accelerator immediately ran to carry out his next step. He activated his ability, placed his hand on the ground, manipulated the Earth's rotational force to create a giant whirlwind, bringing the whole group straight to the top of the building. On Isaac's side, he was still trying to regain control of his body. Just then, Accelerator's group had arrived. Accelerator's mission was just to bring them here. The rest of the work was handed over to Esther. She understood this and gripped the Emperor knife tightly, charging forward to attack. Hasami also ran along to assist Esther. All tentacles targeting Esther were destroyed by Hasami. Thanks to this full support, Esther finally approached Isaac. She raised the knife, preparing to attack him, when Hermes' face showed a pitiful expression, begging Esther not to kill her. And indeed, this trick was very effective. Esther hesitated, giving him time to set up defense. Then Isaac burst out laughing, looking down on Esther. Accelerator also angrily stepped forward and grabbed her neck. As he had mentioned before, if Esther came here to protect what she wanted, she shouldn't hesitate at crucial moments like this. Now Esther had calmed down. She wouldn't fall for that trick again. Esther gripped the knife tightly in her hand and moved toward Isaac. The time for fun ends here. Isaac raised his hand to the sky and began to accumulate power. A giant ball of energy appeared, making everyone terrified. This ball grew increasingly larger, and just as Isaac was preparing to attack Esther, suddenly his body cracked. Isaac was startled to turn and saw the Misaka clone gripping the cable connected to his body, transmitting some data into it. Everything was Dachshund's plan. Although unable to kill him, at least he had bought enough time for everyone to counterattack. Esther seized the opportunity Dachshund had created for her, rushing to attack Isaac, but was blocked by his tentacles. Esther was tightly bound, unable to reach his body with her knife blade. At this moment, the power of friendship arose. Hasami and the Misaka clone joined Esther to push back Isaac. He planned to sneak attack them from behind to break the difficult situation. But Accelerator didn't allow him to do that. With the strength of 3 people, the Emperor knife got closer and closer to his chest. The knife plunged down, and Isaac's scream followed, then vanished into nothingness. At this moment, Harumi could finally return to herself. The little girl smiled brightly, then raised her finger of promise to Esther, before turning to say goodbye to her brother Datshund, and then vanished. Having seen his sister one last time, Datshund was satisfied and closed his eyes, passing away. Esther was then supported by Hasami back to Accelerator. So it's over, right? Accelerator looked around for a while, not seeing anything else happening, and was about to leave when suddenly the entire building shook violently. The Misaka clone grasped the situation very quickly. Based on what she observed, this body belonged to Isaac. Before he died, he had accumulated a lot of energy inside. Now that energy was no longer controlled by anyone, so soon it would explode. The destructive power would likely flatten the entire Academy City. Hearing this, Accelerator didn't hesitate and rushed forward, activating his ability to block the violent energy source for everyone. He did this not because he wanted to be a hero, but because the real hero wasn't here, so he had to do it. Accelerator put all his remaining strength into resistance, not caring if his body was injured or not. As long as he could protect what he wanted, that was enough. At this moment, Accelerator remembered the little Misaka. The desire to protect her gave Accelerator more strength. From behind his back, 2 streams of black air emerged, assisting Accelerator in directing that enormous power straight up into the sky, piercing through space before exploding. After this blow, Accelerator was also exhausted and immediately fainted. Esther was very worried and quickly ran over to check on him. Accelerator was still okay, just depleted of power. Everything ended, and Accelerator returned to days of lying in the hospital. This morning, he had skipped the treatment session, making Misaka very angry, but it was just verbal anger. Whenever Accelerator asked for something, Misaka happily ran to buy it for him immediately. Just as she reached the door, the anti-skill policewoman walked in. Seeing the small Misaka made her think she was Accelerator's child. However, this was a delicate matter, so she didn't want to delve into it. This time, she came here because there were some things she needed Accelerator to explain. According to the report, this incident was caused by Datshun's experiment, but with such a large commotion, no matter how Yomikawa thought about it, she couldn't understand how an ordinary person like Datshun could create such terrifying things. Accelerator was at the center of this matter, so she wanted him to tell her more. Accelerator immediately refused. What Yomikawa wanted to know was just that. This time, the damage was not too severe, so Accelerator advised Yomikawa not to delve too deeply. On Esther's side, she was now preparing to say goodbye to Hasami. Everything was over, so it was time for her to return the body to Hasami's family. The soul inside would return to her charm. At this moment, Esther burst into tears. Hasami knew the reason why. After hearing the conversation between her and that Isaac, once returned to the charm, all memories of this journey with Esther would disappear. However, she wasn't sad and respected Esther's decision. Moreover, Accelerator had already taught Esther, in times like these, don't hesitate. Esther wiped away her tears and intertwined fingers with her, promising that only she would lose memories. Esther would forever preserve these beautiful memories. After saying goodbye to Hasami, it was Accelerator's turn. Before Esther left, Accelerator also gave her a sincere piece of advice. With that ability, Esther shouldn't get involved with the dark side anymore. Esther immediately refused. She would still pursue her own light, as the leader of a clan as well as Accelerator's disciple. After Esther left, Accelerator went up to the roof to drink coffee and look at this rotten city. As long as there were still criminals, he would have to play the villain. Just at this moment, a drone appeared attacking Accelerator. It dropped a suitcase, and inside was a girl. This made Accelerator just sigh. This city truly never had a peaceful day.